Hey everyone, Carl here with Literate Lessons, and the deep dives are back. Yes, we have a little bit under a month until Scarlet and Violet release themselves onto the wild for everyone to play with, and I figured now is as good a time as any to kind of get back into the swing of looking at VGC stuff. We had a fun little stint there with Unite and looking at that, but it's time to get back onto the VGC grind train, try to figure out how this format's going to work. We have a brand new gimmick in Terastallizing that we're going to cover today, how it all works, some benefits and some detriments, and kind of talk about all of that. Before we get started on all that, if you want to see more early Scarlet and Violet videos and things like that, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for notifications for when new videos go live. We upload videos every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. Currently, we just finished, we just did part one of our way too early tier list for what we know from Scarlet and Violet. Part 2 will go up on Monday. Super excited about that. It was a whole lot of fun. And we'll kind of just touch on some Scarlet and Violet and maybe some basic VGC stuff, kind of get everybody back into the swing of things. So for those that may be out of the loop or haven't really been paying attention, Terastallization, or the Terastal phenomenon, is the gimmick for Scarlet and Violet. We kind of like how Dynamax is the gimmick for Sword and Shield, Megas for Gen 6, Z-moves for Gen 7. Terastallization is what makes this game unique and kind of adds on to the complexity of Pokemon games. The big things to remember out of Terastallization, it's not crazy hard to understand, like at the basic level. Every Pokemon can Terastallize. This is cool because it kind of has Dynamax vibes, like everything can do this, so it kind of opens the door to creativity and kind of lets you play around with whatever you want to play with for a while. On top of that, every Pokemon can have any Terra type. Any of the 18 types will be available to a Pokemon as a Terra type. If I remember right, there's like something in the like summary page. It'll tell you Terra type, which will be, sometimes it's like normal, sometimes it's the same type as the Pokemon, sometimes it's completely different and has nothing to do with what the actual Pokemon is. So it'll be fun to kind of gather these up and kind of hunt and track them down to optimize team building. When you Terastallize for the whole battle. This is very similar to how Megas worked in X and Y. You can Mega Evolve and then maybe switch out if you were in danger, but you're not going to lose out on that benefit coming back in. You're not going to have to essentially waste it, kind of like how you would do with Dynamax. If you switched it out early, you don't get to Dynamax again to get those other X turns back. The other big benefit of Terastallizing is there's this new move called Terra Blast. This means that you can have pretty much coverage for everything depending on your Terra types. So things like maybe Steel types getting access to a water move, being like Water Terra type. Your Terra Blast, when you Terastallize, would then become water. It's kind of like a fixed hidden power is the best way to describe it. I believe it's not very, very powerful. I believe like we're looking at like maybe base 60 or base 80, which would definitely be in the realm of just standard, hey, here is my water type attack that is base 80 power. The big thing is it changes based on your highest damage stat, so it could be either a physical attack or a special attack, whichever is higher for the user. I assume this works the same way as like Necrozma Duskmane's Photon Geyser. I assume it works similar to that. It will check your stat boosts and all that stuff, so like if you happen to be intimidated to the point where your special attack would be higher, you could even do that. So it's really cool to kind of be this like catch-all move that everybody can learn, that all Pokemon can use, and it really opens up the door to some unique team building ideas. Speaking of team building ideas, we have a couple of options here, like just for examples of Pokemon that have already been confirmed to be in the game. I'm trying my best to avoid big major spoilers because I'm very deep into all the leaks and stuff, but overall there's most of these, I believe, have been confirmed through being seen through trailers. And we're going to kind of use these 5 as our good examples. So just like Dynamax, I would break it down into, there's a really good way to use Terra type for both ways, right? Like there's a really good way to use offensive Terra types. There's a really good way to use the defensive Terra type. Um, Offensive Terra types benefits here. If you Terastallize into your type that you have, or in case of dual types, one of the two types that you have. So let's say Rotom here, Rotom Wash, Terra types into electric. It would essentially gain Super Stab on its electric type moves. So something like Rotom Wash could then run, let's say, Thunderbolt or Volt Switch. You have to run Hydro Pump. You can also just play like Discharge. But because you Terra into electric, you then lose all of your water typing because Terra overrides all types of the Pokemon. And so you become a pure electric type with the ability Levitate and can just do really good damage with Discharge or Thunderbolt or Thunder or whatever. On top of that, you could also just Terra Water and have really high damage Hydro Pumps. That's something you're interested in. But what makes these offensive Terra type options really strong is the ability to apply stat boosts before committing your Terra. One of the big downsides of the Dynamax was you really only had a limited move pool, even though they were all really high damaging moves and would always hit. Sometimes you would kind of just get into this position where, well, my Dynamax moves aren't doing anything. I kind of wish I could do something else. And that's kind of where Terastallization is going to work into our favor here. You are allowed to use your status moves. They're not all just max guard. Like for Rotom Wash here, you get access to Nasty Plot. So you could Nasty Plot inside of your Terastallization, and then you have even more power going into your really high damaged Thunderbolts or Discharges or whatever move you end up using. In that same vein, something like Azumarill with Belly Drum and huge power could really benefit from just going either straight water or straight fairy, and you could easily just blow things up. Something like Belly Drum into Aqua Jet is already really, really good. And then it becomes even more powerful, and you're more likely to pick up these KOs against maybe even resisted hits at this point, having Super Stab Aqua Jet with a +6 Belly Drum. Azumarill is also one of these Pokemon that has really cool coverage and could Terra into something else and still be an offensive powerhouse. You have moves like Ice Punch. You have moves like Brick Break and things like that, where you can switch types and essentially change overall how you're playing the game. Because if they see a Azumarill on the screen, they may bring their electric type, their grass type, or their poison type or whatever. And if you just happen to change to a fighting type, it's not really going to be that great into your Belly Drum, whatever you're trying to do. There is a downside to Terastallization being as an offensive pivot, kind of like how Dynamax works. If your opponent can make that read, or especially like in a game 2 or game 3, and they realize, oh, they did this last time, this is probably what they're going to do this time, so now I can kind of read into it. I can Terastallize myself as a defensive Terastallization in response, maybe make the move immune, or switch it out into something that's not going to take as much damage or is immune. And that kind of means that you're just locked into whatever you've just done. And if your opponent can kind of get you on the back foot there, you're going to end up falling behind because, like I said, you are locked into that Terra type for the entire game. There's no getting out of it. So if you are like this fighting type of Azumarill and your opponent calls it and brings out whatever flying type or has flying coverage for you, you're probably going to lose your Azumarill pretty quickly. And so that's the kind of push and pull you'll see with these offensive Terastallizations on these hyper offensive teams. You'll see things like Rotom get off really, really strong because the fun fact, when you're an electric type with a ground immunity, you're really, really strong. We'll talk about defensive Terra typings because Hydreigons and Magnezone are both on the screen, and we'll talk about ways to use that here in a second. But like, I think Rotom is going to be very, very strong. I think anything that can boost your stats and has really good typing to start is going to be very, very strong. those will make the really good offensive Terra types really strong. On the flip side, a defensive Terastallization is something I would define as changing your type to avoid something big. In the case of Tyranitar here, we saw this way back in the trailer. I think it was July, or I think around Worlds. Tyranitar Terra typed into a Ghost type to avoid a 4 times effective fighting type attack, and that's kind of the idea with your defensive Terra typings. It can be proactive or reactive depending on the situation, whereas your offensive Terra types are more proactive 95% of the time. Things that have 4 times weaknesses are going to be very good at doing this. Think Magnezone, Hydreigon, Gyarados, stuff like that have a really big weakness that's kind of common. Fairy's common, ground's common, electric common. Fighting is not that common for Tyranitar, but most of the time you're going to want to be a ghost type anyway. Like, there was already people doing the trick or treat, turning yourself into a ghost type, so you just have almost no worries to begin with, is kind of cool. So it'll be interesting to see how people adjust their Terra types and things like that to maybe get some advantages on teams. Looking at some more examples here, we have something like Magnezone. Magnezone has a big ground weakness. You also have weaknesses to fire and fighting, but ground is the big one because you are that electric type. This is a situation where you have enough defenses that you could even just Terra into steel or electric, to where that 4 times weakness is only a 2 times weakness. And that's really, really powerful on something like Magnezone that has a very good special attack. Analytic means if you move last, you get another boost there. And so that's something that you can look at doing and still have it as a defensive Terra type, but you're not removing the weakness, you're kind of just mitigating some of the damage, especially on these bulkier Pokemon that have these 4 times weaknesses. On the flip side of that, things like Hydreigon that have a very powerful stat, but have this levitate ability in this case, have this immunity that doesn't really matter a lot. You can make the type to where it does matter a lot. We talk about this in the podcast a little bit more. Hydreigon's levitate ability and the fact that you're 4 times weak to fairy means that the obvious thing would be like, oh, I can Terra to electric and have 0 weaknesses. But the better option here in this situation is probably to Terra into steel. And now you're immune to ground. Your only weaknesses are fire and fighting. You resist the fairy type and the ice type attacks that would be coming into you normally. And this all around makes it a very good offensive and defensive Terra typing, depending on the situation. And this is where the push and pull is going to end up being in team building a lot of the time. You're going to be looking for what Pokemon can I Terastallize offensively and defensively in certain situations. And those are the Pokemon that are probably going to rise to the top in usage, and we'll see a lot in going into early Scarlet and Violet. And that's the big rundown on Terastallization. I know there's not a whole lot of coverage without really getting into the nitty-gritty leaks. I could talk about the damage numbers and things like that, but that's a whole lot of math that nobody wants to sit here and listen to me talk about for 5 minutes. Super Stab, if I remember correctly, ends up being probably 2.25 times, which, if you think about it, is stab is 1.5, so that kind of the multiplicativity makes sense. So there's the shorthand math for you there. But I think Terastallization is probably going to be one of the more balanced gimmicks we've had. I'm probably in the camp of this is better than Dynamax, this is better than Megas, this is better than anything we've had up until this point. And I would not be upset at the moment if Terastallization just stays the gimmick throughout the rest of Pokemon's life. I would enjoy this so much because it just adds another level of complexity to team building and creativity, and it lets you really show it kind of lets you flex your team building muscles here when you have another layer to kind of team build with. Again, if you like what you see and you want more of this kind of stuff, definitely come back and hit that like and subscribe button, ring the bell, all that great stuff. Leave a comment down below talking if you like Terastallization, if you don't like it, if you think it's terrible. I'd like to have some kind of discussion about it. It's great to talk about this stuff. Have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you're at in the world. It's great to be back with the deep dives, and we'll see you all next week. Bye, everyone.